The last page of the recent chapter got me just about as hype as probably all of you guys were, seeing that Higuruma is finally coming back into the series to fight. And over the past week that the leaks have come out, I've seen a lot of people make posts about Higuruma and even some YouTube videos, but I didn't see people talking about certain things about Higuruma that are mentioned in the manga. So today in this video, I'll be talking about things that have not been said about Higuruma and also things that haven't been said about Yuji, because I feel that even though people are pointing out the obvious things like Yuji has claws now, they aren't pointing out minor things that will come into play during this fight with Sukuna. So today in this video, we'll go over everything that you may or may not have heard and what you should expect from this fight, because I truly do think that this upcoming fight will probably be one of the best in the series. And not only that, but I truly do think that Higuruma will change the tide of the rest of Jujutsu Kaisen. It is said in chapter 165 that Higuruma is a man who has perfected the law and his talent knows no bounds. On this same page, it is stated that Higuruma is a genius and that he was able to do impressive things like pass the bar exam on the first try. But to Higuruma, he thinks that these things were trivial. But even though all of these things are impressive, it says that the thing that stands out about Higuruma the most is his natural talent as a sorcerer. We know that in only 12 days after acquiring his curse technique, Higuruma was able to become as strong as a grade 1 sorcerer. And before we go into detail about exactly what Higuruma's domain expansion allows him to do, let's talk about how this domain expansion will even land in the first place, because although it's pretty obvious to all of us that a domain expansion will happen, some people actually do think that Sukuna will just kill Higuruma before we even get to see a domain expansion. And there are three main reasons that I don't think this is the case, and the first two are pretty small, but the big reason is the third reason. So let me go over the first two reasons really quickly. One, I don't think that Gege will have introduced Higuruma and Yuji at the end of the chapter like this for them to do absolutely nothing. I do think that the reintroduction of Higuruma means that he will play a significant role, especially alongside the main character who has not done anything to Sukuna in a long time. The second reason, which is a narrative reason, is that Sukuna is probably finding this all interesting and wants to see what happens next. I'm sort of taking this from the words that he says at the end of the chapter, asking what Yuji can even do. You know, it is the vessel that he came back after 1,000 years in, and now this vessel has claws, and Yuji pulls up with this professional looking guy with a suit and tie that is holding a gavel that is half the size of himself. I think that Sukuna is finding this all very interesting and wants to see what happens just for the fun of it, because we saw when Sukuna was talking to Kashimo that he just does things based on how he feels at the time. He says that he'll kill somebody if they look at him the wrong way, but at the same day, he will also just play with somebody if they look fun to be around. This is the thing with Sukuna. And even though he has killed Gojo and Kashimo, I would say that Sukuna has actually been more generous than I expected. You know, he even gave Kashimo a warning to dodge an attack before he threw it. He also decided to give Kashimo this sort of sit-down talk and expressed his philosophies for a couple pages. He didn't need to do any of this for Kashimo, as to him, Kashimo was just a random from 400 years ago. He didn't need to spare him all of those words that he decided to, but Sukuna did it anyways. And as well, Sukuna seems like he may have some hopes of fun with Yuji, because we see throughout the series that he actually holds Yuji to some sort of standard. We see when Yuji loses to Choso, he says, "Imagine losing to such an inferior opponent." And then we see whenever he's fighting against Yuji and Maki, he calls Yuji boring, expecting something more than what he is. And now, for the first time, Yuji now has his claws. So I do think that Yuji with these claws and Higuruma with a big gavel will intrigue Sukuna enough that he will see what they have to offer. So I do think that we will see a domain expansion from Higuruma, and I do think that Sukuna will be trapped inside it. And even if Sukuna did try to put a fight up after he was trapped inside the domain expansion, he clearly wouldn't be able to, because Higuruma's domain forbids the use of physical violence. And by Tengen's words, the person who is trapped inside a non-lethal domain expansion is forced to abide by the rules. So Sukuna, even if he wanted to, wouldn't be able to fight Higuruma. He would be forced to take part in a trial. And one thing we know for certain is whatever Higuruma accuses Sukuna of, he will automatically be found guilty, because Sukuna is just a war criminal. He He has done so many heinous things since his time of being alive and coming back to the current era that no matter what thing he is accused of, he is definitely guilty. But there are two main routes that we need to go over for the future of this fight. One is the non-guilty route and the other is the guilty. I do think that there is a chance that Sukuna may be found non-guilty of a specific crime, and if he is found non-guilty of this, then it will arguably be one of the best reveals in recent shonen. So let's cover the non-guilty route first, as this is shorter to cover and is actually one of the best theories I've heard for a possibility of Satoru Gojo returning. Now I will say I do think that this theory is pretty unlikely, but if it does happen, I would find it very cool and this reveal would be amazing. Alright, so the way this theory goes is that after Higuruma traps Sukuna in his domain expansion, he will accuse him of a crime. It will probably be something like murder, as that is what he accused Yuji of during his fight with him, and Sukuna is a murderer. He has killed a bunch of people, so it is possible that the crime in which Higuruma accuses Sukuna of is killing Gojo. So the theory goes, Higuruma takes the same process with Sukuna as he would in any court case in the same way he did against Yuji. He would tell Sukuna the crime he is being accused of, then Sukuna would decide to plead either guilty, non-guilty, or remain silent. And knowing Sukuna, if Higuruma accuses Sukuna of killing Gojo, Sukuna would just simply say that he did kill Gojo, and he would probably say it in the most cocky way possible. And after Sukuna says that he is guilty of killing Gojo, Higuruma in this theory would say not guilty is Satoru Gojo is actually still alive. Now I do like this theory. It is probably the best way to bring back Gojo if Gege plans on bringing back Gojo at all. This theory basically shows that Sukuna himself would have thought that he killed Gojo. He thought that basically the fight against the strongest sorcerer in the modern era was over, and as he takes the moment to gloat about killing this sorcerer in court, he finds out that he's still alive. Now, I do think that this theory is good. I would prefer if this didn't happen, but if it does, I would like it, as I'm pretty sure most of you guys would too, as it would be one of the coolest ways to reintroduce Gojo to the series, and it would also make sense, which is one of the most important parts when bringing back a character who is supposed to have died. Now, let's go over the guilty routes. Sukuna is guilty about just everything under the sun. So the basic thing with being guilty in Higuruma's domain expansion is that the first time that you were considered guilty, you get your curse technique taken away. Now, getting your curse technique taken away isn't that big of a deal for Sukuna, as Sukuna will still have all of the curse energy he has to fight and move as fast as he does, because he is a good physical fighter as well, especially having 4 arms. So the only chance Higuruma and Yuji have is if Sukuna gets called guilty not once but twice, because we know that whenever somebody gets the death penalty in Higuruma's domain expansion, he gains a sword that will cut and kill anybody with no exceptions, which is the important part about this. It says in this statement no exceptions, so somebody like Gojo or Sukuna, if cut by this sword, will just die. And in Yuji's fight with Higuruma, the first time we saw Yuji get considered guilty, he just lost all of his curse energy, but the second time he was considered guilty, Higuruma gained the sword. Now we know that the reason Yuji lost all of his curse energy was because he has no curse technique, and Higuruma's domain expansion will first take your curse technique. I wonder if it would be the same way for Sukuna, where the first time he gets considered guilty of something, he would just lose his curse technique. And if he gets considered guilty one more time, he would then lose his curse energy. One of the big things that would probably play the biggest part in this fight is if Gege has been holding back something else that Higuruma can do, or if Higuruma has learned something since the last time we saw him fight Yuji that would probably be like a third punishment, like maybe first you lose your curse technique, second you lose your curse energy, and then third is some huge power up or something that takes away something even greater from you than your curse energy. Or this third ability could just be making you stand still. And the reason this would be so troublesome against Higuruma is because we know that he gains the sword that will kill you if it cuts you. So if you have to remain still, you would just cut you and you would die. But whatever Gege decides to do with this is truly up to Gege. We can only predict that those are the 2 routes that Gege will go with. One is this huge reveal of Gojo being alive, which once again I do think is a good theory, and that would be the non-guilty route for Sukuna. And the other route would be the guilty route where Sukuna loses his curse technique and curse energy, But even then, I don't even think that would be enough for them to beat Sukuna. I think that's where Yuji comes in, because we saw even Yuji with no curse energy was still able to match Higuruma. So I just know for a fact, even Sukuna without being able to use his curse energy would still be too powerful for Yuji and Higuruma. And maybe that's why Yuta and Maki haven't intervened yet. Maybe they're banking on the fact that Higuruma can get Sukuna to lose his curse technique or his curse energy, because even though Yuta and Maki are far weaker than Sukuna, maybe, just maybe, without curse energy, they can match him and maybe even beat him. Because don't get me wrong, Sukuna's body is extremely strong on its own, no doubt, but sorcerers do use curse energy to amp their speed, their body's toughness, their physical blows. So losing all of your curse energy might make Sukuna as strong or even a little bit weaker than Yuta and Maki. But this is probably where Yuji comes in, because there is a big chance right now that Yuta has gone to go fight Kenjaku, and Maki may be assisting him or be staying back to see what happens with Higuruma and Yuji. But we see at the end of this recent chapter that Yuji has the claws on his hands. Now we do know that at the beginning of the series, whenever Sukuna first reincarnated in Yuji's body, we see that he has these claws whenever he uses his curse technique. So this is a callback to when Gojo said that in due time Yuji's body would get used to Sukuna's curse technique. It seems like this has finally happened, and the thing with Yuji is that even though he would have these slashes, the dismantle and cleaves, he isn't strong enough currently to use these slashes at a level that would even be somewhat of a threat to Sukuna. So the thing with Yuji is that it goes back to that theory of that he ate his brothers, and if he ate all of his brothers, maybe he has gained enough curse energy to maybe be on the level of Maki, Yuta, and Takari. Now if he has, then these slashes would definitely be more powerful to the point where they would damage Sukuna, not sure. But that is where, like I said earlier, the Higuruma part comes in. If Higuruma can get Sukuna to lose his curse technique and curse energy, then slashes from Yuji, if Yuji has truly gained this much strength, probably would do some damage to Sukuna. And I actually made a video, my recent video was Yuji will save Jujutsu Kaisen, where I went over a bunch of things about how Yuji will very well change the ending of Jujutsu Kaisen. And it's funny, I made that video before even seeing that Yuji would come back in this recent chapter, but I'm just gonna bring up for a couple minutes just what I went through in that video to say what Yuji will probably do here. I do think that the whole curse technique thing that we saw with Yuji and Kusakabe while they were training, I think that will show up in this fight, because we did see that Yuji did swap bodies with Kusakabe while they were training. Whether Yuji has this ability for himself and is able to use it at will or not is still unexplored and unexplained. But hopefully Gege will give us more insight as to what exactly this Yuji ability is, because we did see some foreshadowing with the book that Yuji received from Yuki on soul research. And then we did see Yuji and Kusakabe were in each other's bodies. So there is a big underlying thing there with Yuji being able to swap bodies with people, and he is now some sort of maybe expert on souls. But I will say, if you want to know more about the whole Yuji curse technique soul thing that's going on and the potential for Yuji to save everything, then I do recommend you check out my recent video, the one before this, about how Yuji will save Jujutsu Kaisen. And one sort of take that I've seen on social media a lot recently is that, you know, Jujutsu Kaisen's antagonist might actually win. And I'm not opposed to that. I actually have always sort of liked the idea that Sukuna and Kenjaku would be the ones who stand at the end of everything. And it would make sense, you know, the stronger and smarter guys winning would make sense. Because normally in these shonen series, we see that even though these antagonists are stronger and smarter, they usually get foiled by one teeny tiny mistake they made, or the main characters get a big power up and friendship normally prevails in the end. We know that Gege is pretty different from other mangaka, and whether Gege actually decides to take this route or not is very up in the air, I would say, because normally whenever main characters get a big power up, they usually go through a bunch of struggle. So whenever they do get a bunch of power, you like it. You like the fact that they now have the power to defend their friends who they've lost along the way. And if you look at Yuji, he's lost friends along the way. He lost his sensei, and he's been struggling the entire series, especially during the Shibuya incident and during the Culling games. So we know for a fact Yuji has sort of met the qualifications for a power-up in a shonen series, and when he gets it, which it seems like he's getting one now, which are these claws that he has, Whether or not it's going to put him to the level of Sukuna, we're going to see in the next couple of chapters. And if it does, then I do think that the good guys will win this series. If it doesn't, then I probably do think that Sukuna and Kenjaku would win. Because although Yuta, Hikari, and Maki are main characters, you know, they aren't background characters by any means. They're not the character who will save the show. It's not their story. It really is Yuji's story of him becoming a sorcerer and dealing with all of the deaths and hardships that come with being a Jujutsu sorcerer. You know, we didn't get this story until we got it from Yuji's point of view in chapter 1. So, you know, I don't think that it is anybody else's story to save but him. You know, Yuta was the savior of Volume 0. He already had his own story. So the end of the main story of Jujutsu Kaisen is up to Yuji. So I do think that this power-up, the one where Yuji now has these claws, and it looks like he has Cleave and Dismantle, this will truly change the ending of Jujutsu Kaisen. And with that being said, that is all I have for today's video. And if you enjoyed, then please leave a like and subscribe to the channel, as I do post on different topics that you guys give me and a few that I come up with on my own. Thank you so much for watching. See you next time.